Thank you, Tay. That was fantastic. And I'd like to follow on by saying that storytelling is the traditional way for Aboriginal people, and it's been in place for 80,000 years and up, and it will continue to do so. Straight from the horse's mouth. So, yeah, keep talking. All right, my topic is how to build natural immunity. Your health is your wealth. It represents happiness, resilience, vitality, joy, and much more. And without it, life is a struggle. It's a burden. We are full of anxiety, grief, and pain. And we're seeing that today. It is your human right to be healthy. And it is your God-given right to have a healthy environment to live in. Health is an inherited legacy passed down to us and your children and your grandchildren through wisdom, knowledge, culture, tradition, and spirit. Our Indigenous ancestors held this law, L-O-R-E, for 80,000 years and upwards, respecting the earth, the air, and the water, which are the caretakers of our health. I can see your problem, Michael, falls off. Yet, Big Pharma, the Big Four, Merck, GlaxoSmithKline, Pfizer, Sandofi Pasteur will all have you convinced, if you believe them, that you can buy your health and your children's health at the tip of a needle. Yeah. A needle vaccination is not a legacy, and it cannot provide health. It does not represent a caretaker role to protect your body or your children's. On the contrary, it is being passed on to you through greed, power, money, and false science, and there is no wisdom. It is a medical intrusion and an intervention, destroying human health, culture, families, and our right to choose, our democracy. Fight for your right to your health, the inherited legacy passed down to you through your ancients and your ancestors, not by Big Pharma. As we speak, Californians have begun their fight for health and freedom. As we speak, against the bill SB 276 and SB 714, which further erode their rights and the rights of the doctors to even provide exemptions. The rights for their children to go to school. We haven't seen their demonstrations in our mainstream media, as Judy has pointed out. You know why. But I will be the reporter, and I will tell you that the citizens of California are there in a vigil with candles, and they've been there for 3 nights outside the chambers. For all those that are listening on live stream, it is happening as we speak. They are outside those chambers around the embassy, and they've kept those fires burning like our Aboriginal embassy across the road, and they have been there for 3 nights. They have surrounded the building in a human protection, and they have shut down 2 chambers, and they have stood on tables, and they have turned the American flag upside down. Just as they have turned our lives upside down, as it's been said today. They also plan to walk their children in a human protection chain, hand by hand, into the school that they've been forbidden to enter if they're not vaccinated, and that will take place very shortly. Good ideas. Yes. Since this former bill and others, homeschooling has trebled. People are choosing to educate their children at home. An important indicator of good public health as Judy was speaking about, is the statistics of infant mortality in the first year of life. Japan had one of the highest death rates for cot death in the world. In 1975, Japan stopped the DPT, and cot deaths plummeted, and they then became almost the lowest infant mortality in the world. Japan banned the triple jab, the MMR, which is measles, mumps, rubella, in 1993 after 1.8 million children developed non-viral meningitis. That means it was caused by another reason, and as we would understand, vaccination. Other adverse reactions were blindness, deafness, handicaps and death. Japan doesn't vaccinate pregnant women. And the HPV, the human papillomavirus, and there was a little article that was passed around there of the death of one of those young teenagers, is not required in Japan. USA has the highest infant mortality in the first year of life. Why? They are the highest vaccinated Western country in the world. In fact, 1 in 29 children in some states have autism. It is estimated that by the year 2032, there will be 1 in 2 children, if the current rate continues, that will have autism or some disability which prevents life continuing. Children affected will be continually affected, and we will win because the problem will not go away. It is currently about 42 doses of the different 14 vaccines that were said. So there are 14 different vaccines, but there are many doses of those. You might get 3 doses of this and 3 doses of hepatitis. So these poor little children under 5 actually get up to 42 doses, or can potentially. We are sicker. And we were sicker with an epidemic explosion of autoimmune disease. So if vaccines were safe and effective as they claim, why is this happening? Why are we the sickest that we have ever been? This is the biggest medical intervention in human history that we have ever seen. And we're programmed to believe that the vaccines are safe and effective. The big pharma have programmed and infiltrated most institutions and most media, as you've heard, and are about to control the internet. Where do we go to from here? Who do we trust? When the serious criminals are there, and as we've heard, 50% of the profits that big pharma have are funded to WHO, which is the World Health Organization. We have to trust somebody, so we have to trust ourselves, as Tay said. You have to do your own research. You have to decide what goes into your body and your children's body, and you have to take the gift of health back to you and back to your children, and away from the criminals and away from the felons, and back to your family. It's your voice and it's your choice. You have the rights to choose and you have the rights to refuse. Now, how can we do this? Your natural immunity is still there. Your wisdom is still there. Your intuition is still there. You downgrade your fear, as Tay said. Don't bite into that hysteria. Nature is our guide, and it's something we can trust as we take back our power. Immunisation is not vaccination, and vaccination is not immunisation. You can be... There is natural immunity, and immunisation and has been here for centuries, and we are still in the process of immunising ourselves naturally to everything we breathe in right now. When we vaccinate, which is different to immunising, that vaccination goes straight into your arm and it bypasses, as Judy said, all of your natural in-place immune responses. When you immunise, those pathogens go in through your nose and your mouth, and they go down in and hit your first line of defence, which is your mucous membranes, and then it goes to your lymphatics and your glands and down to your thymus, and you build up antibodies at a cellular level. When you have a vaccination in the arm, it bypasses that. So it's like trying to feed yourself through your ear and your nose instead of your mouth. So it doesn't work, and it's very damaging. Vitamin D is for immunity. Vitamin D reduces autoimmune response. It is in your receptors for vitamin D are in every system of your body, and it is much cheaper than the billions spent on vaccines. How would it be if the government decided to give free vitamin D and zinc? Then we would have improved public health, not a health crisis. Breastfeed. Eat organic food. Sleep. Breathe your fresh air. Have love in the house. Avoid conflict as much as you can. Many GPs do not vaccinate their own children. GPs are taught one thing, to revise the schedule. They are taught nothing about side effects, adjuvants, ingredients, adverse reactions, or reporting. In fact, less than 1% of adverse events are reported because people don't know where to report them. They don't know what an event is. And of course, it's up to the individual to report, as one of the speakers said today. The failure of the vaccines has been blamed on the unvaccinated. When Merck's vaccines failed, they decided to target the unvaccinated. And this has vilified, separated, stopped job choice. It's broken communities, families. There is bullying, vilification. Schools, communities have all been affected, and particularly Aboriginal communities who are more vulnerable, and they have been targeted to have 5 extra vaccines. When Christine, there's other people in this room that were helpful when we worked from about in about 2012 to 2015, we targeted all the senators, and we were instrumental in obtaining a Senate inquiry, and that Senate inquiry was stacked, and they've never followed through with a review. They said they'd do that 3 years later. However, at that inquiry, a terrible statement was made, and on one of the senators that were conducting the inquiry asked one of the health officials whether how accurate the register was of recording vaccines given to children, and he was very reluctant to answer, and he was prompted many times, and finally someone else answered and said it was very inaccurate, and Senator Moore said, well, how much? And he said 50%, and they were asked, well, how do you know that? And he replied that some Aboriginal children in some communities were actually vaccinated for 20 times for the same disease. Our Indigenous brothers and sisters know that interventions never work, and they never will. And now we find ourselves in a medical intervention alongside them. The corruption, the hidden agendas and the propaganda at every level are moving humanity towards ill health and extinction in their selfish quest for power and money. 4.2 billion has been paid out in the USA for damages. There is, as we speak, work on such a thing as the Holy Grail, which is a vaccine that will be potentially put into the mouths of babes as soon as they're born, and they will have no further vaccines because these will be time released in their bodies as they grow. But if you react to that, you can't get it out. And you won't know what's normal anymore because it's on day one, like our hepatitis vaccine. It hasn't happened yet, but they're working on it. Now, the truth of Big Pharma's very bad, shady history can be reflected in a couple of scenarios. One of them was the Gulf War. Now, the Gulf War syndrome was a terrible affliction on the people that came back from the war, and they had lots of neurological conditions. And when, just to make it quicker, they received 6 vaccines which they didn't know about, and they received more on leaving the site, and their condition was blamed on Iraq. However, the French did not have the Gulf War syndrome, and they were there. So it led back, and then there was another lot of troops that did not even attend the Gulf War, and they had Gulf War syndrome, so it all went back to the anthrax vaccination. They found squalene, which is an adjuvant. They found antibodies to that squalene in those affected people. And finally, there is not a conspiracy about a vaccine against pregnancy. Very quickly, in the 1990s, the World Health Organization, funded by you-know-who, we've talked about, decided to embark upon a tetanus program, and so approached poor third world countries like Mexico, Nicaragua and the Philippines, and they set out some protocols and said that they were going to do 3 vaccines, and they were all going to be to females, and they were going to have 3 in 3 months, but a total of 5. And the HLI, which is the Human Life International, they noticed that these protocols were very strange for tetanus because it's not gender preferenced, and you shouldn't have 3 in 3 months. So when they looked into it, they decided to have the vials examined, and in those vials they found HCG, which is human chorionic gonadotropin, which is a hormone that you produce when you're pregnant to have a viable pregnancy, and it must escalate so much percent as the pregnancy advances. They approached the World Health Organization and said, we found this in those vaccines. And the World Health Organization said, oh, well, it must be only a little bit. And they said, no, actually, there was quite a lot in there. And they said, oh, well, it mustn't have affected the women. So they said, no, we've examined 30 of 40 women that had it, and they all have high levels of this antibody. So here we have a tetanus shot coupled with HCG in an attempt to control population. And it's all documented, and I have the book, and we have it here with us, and there's all the court cases. So what can you do? You can speak up. You can use your intuition. You can follow. You can talk and spread and tell your stories. You avoid chemicals. You visit your MP. You ask the doctor for the insert. You ask him what's in it. You ask him for informed consent. You ask him or her to demand for the science that proves that these are safe, because there isn't any. And finally, a very important thing that you can do is to vote for the IMO party so that you have a voice in Parliament to broaden those exemptions and to open up a Royal Commission into the corruption and the destruction. Thank you.